Okay,
We're good.
so it looks like we're recording. So we have a panel of guests that are going to be speaking about this topic today. They're from Sheridan County School District 1, which is actually my school district too, where I live and my kids go. But they started standards reference grading K through 12th grade in 2014. And so we're joined by Pete Kilbride, superintendent, Sarah Mcginnis, curriculum director. Before I start, if you're not familiar with Sheridan County or finished Sheridan County School District 1, we are in kind of two locations, Ranchester, Dayton, and Bighorn. So we have 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 elementary schools. So Annie Griffin is the Tongue River Elementary principal. Lee Zimmer is a math teacher the only math teacher at Bighorn Middle School. And then Clint Crum is on the school board, and he also has 2 daughters in the school district, so he can speak from the parent side. Andy Marcure, an English teacher at Tongue River High School, was going to join us. She had something come up, but she sent me some things to share as we go along here. We would like to have time to answer your questions. So as we go along, you could put a question in the chat as our speakers are talking, or just unmute and ask. That's fine too. So with that said, I'm going to start with Sarah Mcginnis, the curriculum director. She's been with this since the beginning and did a lot of the footwork to start with. So Sarah, if you kind of just want to start and give some background on why did so long ago this school district decide to switch to this grading system?
Thanks, Carol. I'd be glad to. We actually started the standards-based grading process with our curriculum process. And I was going back through our minutes of our steering committee for the curriculum process, and we were having conversations back in 2012 and 2013. And I think they formed because we started identifying what students needed to know and be able to do, and then how we were going to measure that. And Bighorn Middle School was instrumental because they were piloting standards-based grading on their own, and they had done some research. So some of those teachers, including Lee, were on our steering committee, and so it was kind of like a natural progression to lead into as we went through the process. Because the concept was new to many of us, we read and discussed articles, we looked at video presentations, we visited with other districts, and we discussed all the finer points of a percentage system and what they mean and what changing to a standards-based grading system would mean to us. The most compelling argument, in our opinion, was that we felt like we needed to shift from teaching being the most important work to learning, student learning as the focus. So that's what led us down this path. As we began the process, we were in the middle of a math review and adopting the 2012 math standards. So we thought we would try it out with math. And we did for several years, try that, worked out the bugs. Pete will talk to you later about the conversion chart, but we really tried to get it right before we brought everybody else into the process. So it was hard going at first, just trying to figure it out. We didn't anticipate all of the roadblocks that would come up, with the conversion in high school and some of the other things that, we just weren't anticipating. The advice I'd give to educators that are changing to this system is to not underestimate 3 things. The amount of communication with parents and students needs to be ongoing. And that's something I think we probably still continue to work on. The other thing, the amount of staff training for principals and new teachers needs to be ongoing as well. And the last thing is proficiency skills really are the heart of the system. As a parent, it's far easier for me to look at a list of outcomes that my student needs to master and understand what they know and what they have yet to learn. And I find that it's a more accurate way of measuring student learning. So having proficiency scales in place came after we actually adopted. And I know we're still in the process of gathering those and creating those for all of our subject areas and all of the grade levels. So Carol, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. If each of you would just kind of share your experience with standards reference grading and talk about how it was when you first started using it and now. Let's start with you, Lee, Bighorn Middle School Math. We can't hear you.
Lee, you might have to connect with audio if you see that. Even if you were unmuted, there's a tab that says connect with audio. Because like right now you're not muted, but I bet we can't hear you. And it may be in the background.
Why don't we go to Annie Griffin while you work on that, Lee? Is that all right? So Annie's the principal at Tongue River Elementary.
Yes, so I'm the fortunate principal of Tongue River Elementary. I've been here, this is my 4th year. But before that, I came in pretty early on in the process. This is my 7th or 8th year in the district. I haven't counted on my fingers yet, but I would say that I started as a teacher in the district, and that's how I began using this. And it changed my practice. And the reason I say that is it became so much more about learning and the students learning. I learned that my students, I needed to know exactly where they were in the progression of completing each of those standards and meeting those outcomes is what we call our standards, I should say. And for us, it was all about, we're not going to give up on you. We're not going to fail you. An F is not an option. And we will keep trying until you get there. And our superintendent, Mr. Kilbright, always uses that analogy of your driver's license that you don't, and I'm sorry, Pete, if I took your thunder on that, but sorry, but that, you know, if many of us were given up on us after the first attempt at our driving test, that where would we be today? So many people wouldn't be driving. And so I just really learned about using that data to drive my instruction and truly being able to explain not only to students, but to parents where they were in the learning progression. And I had to take that time to figure out and manage my time and be very organized to be able to meet the needs of every child and make sure that they met that end goal. As a principal, I think some of the big things that have come forward, just to remember that and remind our students and our teachers and our families that multiple opportunities are given for your child to be successful here. We're not giving up on your child ever. And I think at the elementary level, especially when it comes to literacy and math, we can't send them on to the middle school and high school without those things in place. And I think that the standards reference grading really helps us know exactly where they are when they leave each grade level. Big part of that is the formative checks. Teachers have got to be doing those little assessments, not waiting till the end of the unit or whatever that is to find out where they are. There are no surprises if we've done it properly. And I think the last thing that I would say is that children learn perseverance. They learn that we will not give up on you, and we will encourage you not to give up on yourselves, and you will have a growth mindset. You haven't gotten there yet, and that's okay. Some of us take a lot more exposure to the learning before we can grasp it and keep it tight. So those are the big things I would say that that would describe my experience.
Thank you. About Pete Kilbright is the superintendent.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. I'll share some thoughts more from a Tongue River Middle School principal perspective, because that's where I was when we first adopted it. And I'll echo what my colleagues have said. We really started to focus on learning rather than teaching. And so it wasn't about, well, I delivered it, they didn't get it, let's move on. And we really started to examine that practice as we were going through the curriculum and then really dialing in on our assessments, because there's only so much time in a day, and we have narrowed down what our standards are, what we think is the most important thing for our kids to learn before they move on. And so, as Annie said, failure is not an option. If you really believe that this is important for a kid to know, how can you simply just say, well, they didn't get it and it's October, so I need to be on my next assignment? That, it's really crazy when you break it down that way and start to think about it. And that's exactly what we started doing. And time becomes the variable, and between the ages of birth and 5, we know that kids learn to walk, talk, potty train, all that at a different level. But by God, between the ages of 6 and 18, they will all learn exactly the same way at exactly the same rate. That's pretty silly as well. And so for me, it was kind of an aha. And I struggled through 25 years of guilt as a social studies teacher, going, I have totally ruined these kids' lives because I was taking 10% off because it was a day late, and I'm going to teach them about responsibility, doggone it, and once I was done teaching it, I moved on to the next thing, whether they knew it or not. And so I had to really reflect on that. I will tell you, the assessment piece was really important for me, because at the time we were doing math, and that's always our pilot, and poor Lee gets the charge of, okay, we have something new, let's have Lee try it. And we have math do that. And then we were kind of slow to get on board with everybody else. And finally, I just said, I'm tired of living in two worlds. I think it's silly that math is doing it and the rest of us are waiting till math gets it perfect, because it's never going to be absolutely perfect. And so my question to the staff was, okay, defend an 84%. What's an 84%? 84% of what? And if a kid can get an 84 and they can get an 85, what's the difference between the two? And nobody can tell me that. But we give those grades all the time. With standards reference grading, it is broken down. And this is what a 1 is. This is what a 2 is. Here's a 3. Here's a 3.5 and a 4. So if you give a kid a 3.5, I can tell you exactly what they know and are able to do, and what they're missing and why they can't get a 4. I couldn't do that with an 84%. I have no idea what an 84%, I don't know what they're good at, what they're bad at. If I took points off because it was late, I gave them extra points because they brought in pumpkin pie. So it really kind of turned assessment on its head for us, and really drilled down to what they knew and were able to do. And I think you'll find when you start to look at standards reference grading, you're going to kind of go, this makes a lot of sense. I get it. We're separating behaviors from what kids actually know and what's important. And as Annie says, failure is not an option. But the amount of time it takes you to figure it out, that we can work with you on. And the driver's ed thing, you're exactly right. But think about woodworking too. If we took your first piece of woodworking and I averaged it with your last piece at the end of the year, and I grade you on that average, you're probably going to be kind of mediocre, because when we start something, we're probably going to fail at it a lot of times. Why in the world would I ever incorporate that into a final grade? I want to grade the final piece, the masterpiece that they did, not the painting they started off with in September, and then average it with the masterpiece they did in May. Yet I did it almost all of my career and thought it was perfectly acceptable. But now you look at it and go, nah, that makes no sense at all. So a lot I could share on that. Pretty passionate about it, but I'll let somebody else talk for a while.
Thank you. Lee, are you ready? Maybe?
Well, you tell me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of missed, Annie, what you had spoken about, and I had listened to most of Pete's. I could, just totally agree with what they're saying. I'm really passionate about it, but just to start with, as a teacher, again, math was piloting the standards-based grading. I would say the parents weren't totally against it, but they just had a lot of questions. They just wanted to know why. Of course, everybody went to school, so they know maybe they don't know what an 80% means, but they know that they must be doing okay. I would have parent-teacher conferences on kids and say, well, they didn't do page 84. And I'd have to look at page 84 and tell, well, they didn't get this. I don't know if they didn't do it. I don't know if they didn't understand it. But again, it was more about compliance at that point. And if they didn't do well on it, I didn't know exactly what that was. I had to look it up. So again, just having some conversations like that with parents and explaining to them that, yeah, it is really assessment based and what they can show me they can do. Especially at the middle school, parents go, well, that's one assessment. That's kind of scary, but it's not really one assessment. It is multiple opportunities and showing the teacher what they know and can do through quizzes, through classwork, through practice. And I just had a conversation with a parent last night. Okay, so the kid wasn't proficient yet. It's not this like major assessment where you only get one shot at it. They get a chance to redo what they did, not understand, and they got to show it again. They get another opportunity. And so I think it's just also the language that we use. They didn't get it yet. It's an opportunity to come in. And then also I think it's critical at middle school that we're catching the kids that don't want to do the work. It's not an option. It just really, failure is not an option. And in order to show me that you're proficient on something, you have to do the practice. You have to. And so I think maybe there's some misconception that, standards-based grading might be easier because it comes down to the assessment and just, it's that assessment, but it's quite the opposite. It's much more difficult. And I can only speak, of course, at the teacher level. It's exhausting. It's hard work. It's it just is grueling. But I can tell you the opposite is it's so rewarding. I could say that probably 10, 15 years ago, I was kind of burnt out. I mean, how many times can I teach fractions, right, at middle school? This has really just relit my passion for teaching. I sit and I work with kids, and that's what I love to do. And it's amazing the amount of work, how rewarding it is. So not easy work, hard work, but I feel every day I'm making a difference. And I don't ever dread parent-teacher conferences. I mean, it used to be, like I said, it was, how's your kid doing? Well, they're doing good or they're doing bad. But I can be so specific now about, well, they didn't get the geometry, they don't know angles, and parents appreciate that. Oh gosh, well, we can talk about that. And the communication has just gone through the roof as far as being able to communicate with parents. So again, I could go on, and so I'll be happy to answer questions, but I think what I would leave with is it's not easy, it's hard. I think what Pete said, you just kind of have to make a decision to go with it. It's not ever going to be perfect. We're still not perfect. There's a lot of things that, we can always get better. But I think when you learn something new and you go, yeah, oh, that makes sense, always be willing to adjust and to be flexible and have those conversations with colleagues and parents and kids. The kids, I think, are the biggest, I don't know if supporters is the right word, but they get it. They understand it. It's like, I got to learn this. So hard work, but so rewarding.
Thank you. Clint Crum is on the school board, and I said also is a parent. Can you just share your thoughts from both of those sides, Clint?
My school board answer will be much quicker than my parent answer. From a school board perspective, our job is to give the best education for the students, and standard reference grading is a better education for our students. It's pretty simple. And I think about it, if their education is a house, we start with the foundation. We do not move on to framing the house until the foundation's complete. And it just makes sense that you move on progressively. As they get something, they move on. And Gary Reynolds, our past chairman, used to say that there's only one place in the world you get to take a test once, and that's at school. In the rest of the world, you keep working on it. And that's great advice. It's the best way to go. So from a school board perspective, we go with what's best for our students. That's why we're here. And it works well for them. From a parent standpoint, I like it as well. If my kids get it, sometimes they say they're bored in class, but the teachers do a great job. If somebody doesn't get it, they have them help somebody else. And I love that that teaches empathy, and you don't really learn something until you can teach it. And that helps reinforce that. I think my kids get a better education with it. My kids have known nothing else, and ABCD doesn't make any sense to them. They learn it and they move on, and that's what they understand. And as a parent, I love that. That's what life looks like. That's my perspective.
Thank you. Sarah, do you have anything you want to add to this?
You know, one thing I would just like to share with you, Carol, I think you asked a question, do we believe that standards-based grading will be the new grading standard? I don't really know the answer to that. I think there are lots of colleges back east that are also examining their entrance practices as far as GPA, because they know that grading can be really subjective, you know, in districts, across states, you know, and across the nation. So I know that they're looking at that, but I think the reason that we do a grade conversion at high school and why it is hard to implement at the high school level, that's something that still has to be addressed. I do know that, like Lee said earlier, it isn't easy to implement for sure. And I do think that at one point, one of the principals looked at me and said, hey, can we just go back to percentage grades? You know, wouldn't it be easier? And I said, oh yes, I'm sure it would be easier. I said, but could you really go back? You know, now that we know what we know about student learning, and we know how much more accurate and relevant and meaningful the scores are, could we really go back? And we agreed that we couldn't. So I hope we're not giving the impression that we are perfect at it and we have it all down and we have all the answers. But they say curriculum work and schoolwork never ends. There's always more to do. And so we keep rolling with the flow and learning new ways to do things. So, and we'll entertain any questions. And also the hard parts that we have, that we continue to struggle with is the ongoing training, you know, to make sure that everybody is implementing consistently, that everybody understands what they're doing, because it is a different system. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, I'll share with you what Andy Marcure wanted me to share with the group. She said, as an English teacher, I feel empowered by the proficiency scales. I remember how overwhelming grading writing could feel because there were so many working parts, the ideas of the writer, the clarity with which those ideas are written down, the organization, the grammar, mechanics, and usage, all which are clarified with the 4-3-2-1 scale. My teaching is more refined and rigorous, and my feedback is more targeted with standard reference grading. It also makes explaining to a student what they missed more precise. I'm no longer having to defend why they received an 82% instead of an 86%, especially in regards to English, where scores like that are more subjective. The next question, and this will probably be more for Annie and Lee, and Sarah and Pete, you can probably have an answer to this too, but how do the students feel about this? Annie, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. I would say they know we won't give up on them. And I think they just know this is just the way that things work. And they know that they're not expected to get it on that first try, that if they don't, it's okay. If they do, we'll celebrate that too. But if they're not there yet, it's okay. And I think that's something that's so hard for people to learn, that you don't have to be perfect. And I think that this system helps take that human part into consideration, I guess is what I would say with it. I think that for them here at TRE in particular, a big part of that is tracking those goals. And I think the kids love it when they have met a goal as a class, when they know exactly what it takes to meet that goal. They have personal thermometers where they're coloring up. Okay, so I got this part, so I'm at a level 2 right now. And I'm working to get this part to be at a level 3. And then my job is to try to fill up that thermometer, either to a 3 or a 4. And then when kids get that, we celebrate as a class when everybody's reached the class thermometer, and then even something as small as a dance party in class. I've seen some goofy celebrations and a lot of laughter. And I think really when we celebrate that academic success, I think it makes a huge impact on the students. And we've had stories of kids that were special education students, and we use their accommodations to help them reach those outcomes. And that was the first time they ever have felt success in that way. We had a kid that cried when they went up and colored in on the thermometer that they had met that goal. And we don't do it by name. We just do it, you know, broken up into the number of students. But those kind of things, we don't realize what a positive impact this kind of teaching and learning has on our students. So I would say at TRE, it's a very positive thing.
Lee.
I would say that same as Annie, it's a positive thing with our kids. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen kind of the same idea. I've had a kid since 6th grade who's now an 8th grader, never proficient the first time, and it kind of bothered the mom, and I know it bothered the student. He wasn't proficient the first time. Well, I have him in 8th grade this year, and the second assessment they took, not only was he proficient, but he was advanced. And literally the kid was running out of the school to go show his mom his assessment. And the other thing about that is the kid earned it. It was the student himself. I can't give it to him. It's not because I like him. It's not, oh, I felt bad for him. It literally, he earned it. And it teaches that perseverance and that grit and stay with it, and the whole idea of I don't have it yet. On the opposite side of that, I've seen students who don't think they're advanced in math. They don't consider themselves math people, and I say to them, try the level 4 because we don't make them, but I definitely encourage them all to try the level 4. And students will sometimes just kind of write something little down because they think they must just totally be wrong. And sometimes just for what they're writing, I might have to go grab them and say, tell me what you were thinking here. And they'll explain it to me, and they'll get a 3.5 or a 4. And their eyes just literally light up like, I didn't think I could do that. Yeah, you can. And so it encourages that conversation with kids, builds their confidence. And again, now I would say our kids don't know any other way. They just know that, hey, if I didn't get it, I need to go in and I need to figure out what I need to learn. And so again, the focus is on learning, not on just, oh, I taught this great lesson today. Okay, I taught a great lesson, but the kid still doesn't get it. So we put the work in to make sure that I might have to explain it a different way, assess it a different way. We really think outside the box, but it's really about what the kids can know, what they know, and what they can show us they know.
Thank you. I'm going to read what Andy sent. It's interesting, and she's at the high school level, and we're going to move into that here in a minute. But you know, she said the students are aware of the target and demonstrate proficiency more authentically than the last ditch. Can I do extra credit to raise my grade at the last moment? It's a clear guideline for the teachers and the students. And she said, my students are familiar with this grading system as our district's been doing it for some time now. Recently, for one of my outcomes, students could choose their debate topic. A couple of them chose traditional grading versus standards-based. The student who chose the traditional side through her research found that she agreed and appreciated that we were standards reference grading. Students of all ability levels value the nature of the proficiency scales. So that was interesting. Pete, Sarah, do you have anything to add on how you think students feel about it?
I can follow with what Andy is at one of our high schools, and I know the principal of that high school said, you know, I want to I want the students to make the leap, you know, from having to just complete assignments because it's compliance, you know, to that they need to learn this. And he asked me if there was anything that he could do differently or that the school could do differently. And one of the things we discussed was when you look around the classrooms, we saw the conversion chart up on the wall in every single classroom, you know, so a 2 equals this grade, you know, traditional grade, 3 equals this traditional grade, and so forth. And so the teachers had said, students keep saying, well, I got a 2, what does that mean? You know, is it a C, is it a D? And of course, D is passing. But the wonderful thing about this group of people was they decided they were going to shift that thinking. So they took down their conversion charts and they put up the proficiency scales. Not only did they put up the proficiency scales, but at the beginning of the unit, they share those with their students. And then they have the students reflect after the first assessment to say, how did you do? And Andy would tell you at the beginning, and she's shown me these reflections from the students where they'll say things like, oh, I just need to learn this. And they were pretty shallow responses. And after a few weeks of doing this, the responses were deeper, they were richer, kids were understanding more, and then students were asking, when can we come in? When can we get help? We need to know this. So they were starting to understand that the targets were out there, they were more clear to them, they understood where they needed to go and what they needed to do. And I think for the students, they felt like it was doable. So just another shift and something that they decided to try differently this year.
Yeah, and Carol, I'll be really brief because I know we have some other things to talk about, but yeah, the language has really changed. It's changed with our faculty and now it changed with our students, and they're not asking about, because in a bygone era, it would have been, I need 10 more points to get to a B. It had nothing to do with learning, just simply points. I don't care where they come from, just points. And now it really is about, this is what I need to do. And a great example at the middle school, I went into an art class and I asked a girl what she was working on, and she said, oh, I'm doing this. And I really want the 4. So what I have to do with my shading is I have to be able to show shadows. And she went and showed me an exemplar on the wall, and it had the proficiency scale up there. And she already had a product that was already at a 3 level. But she wanted the 4, so she knew exactly what she needed to do in order to improve on that piece of artwork that she was doing. So the language, and it starts with us, we have to start to change that language, and it carries down to the kids as well.
Thank you. We had oh, there it is. A question. What does your proficiency chart look like? I don't know if any of you want to talk about that.
Our proficiencies, I think you're asking about proficiency scales or a conversion chart. So proficiency scale, basically the teacher will take the outcome and then they will say, okay, what does the student have to know to be proficient? You know, and they'll look at the level 3 and then they determine, you know, what components need to be mastered to be proficient. Then they'll say, what are the foundational skills? And they'll list those in a level 2. So the foundational skills could be vocabulary, they could be prerequisite knowledge. And then they look at the level 4 and say, what would be an advanced, what would an advanced student look like? Or advanced performance look like? So they do that for every outcome that they have in every subject area. So if you want to email me, I can also share some of those with some of the people, Carol. If maybe I could put my email in there.
Yeah, and I was also going to say, if you have something that you could send me in, and then I could send it out to the people that were on the call with us tonight. Yeah, that would be great. Okay. Let's see. Okay, got that. Clint, you volunteer coach and have daughters. Do you have any input on how students feel about it?
My kids know nothing else. I mean, they think it's awesome. The students that go to school with them, I mean, my oldest one is a sophomore in high school, and she's known it her entire school career. She knows nothing else. She doesn't know what PCD means. She knows I've met proficient, I'm advanced, I've learned. And all of the students that they go to school with, that's all they've known. They don't know anything different, and they love it. They either know it or they don't, and it's very clear to students. From a parent perspective, us growing up with different grades, at first we didn't know where they were, and it's really obvious where they're at once they explain it to you. And from the parent perspective, it's much easier to know if your kid is learning it or not. And the kids, I know they like shooting for, they don't like the word proficient. They'd like to work past that. And I think proficient's a good word for it, but they all seem to really like it. They know nothing else.
Yeah. Thank you.
Carol, can I just add something?
Of course.
Just as a parent, which I am as well, but it came up a few years ago. We had really hardworking students in the high school, but maybe didn't know math the best. Like, you really wouldn't want them to go in any sort of like building bridges career. But they would come out of there with, 98% or and look really fantastic, but then going into college would end up taking the lowest level math. Well, these kids that were getting great percentages were doing all these other things to get points. And I don't mean bringing pumpkin pie. I think Mr. Kilbride mentioned that, but, maybe just doing more assignments, but it wasn't necessarily about what they were learning. And so when they go to college, they were taking lower level math, if not bonehead math. I think now with the standards based, we're able to catch all of those basic skills, because in order to be a 4, you also had to meet all the level 2 requirements, all the level 3 requirements. And so I know as a parent that if my daughter comes home with a 4, that she knows the basics. She also can apply it, and then she's gone beyond that. And so I don't worry as much about what she's learning, and that she's getting the foundational skills as well. And it's not necessarily college, but just to be able to apply it to wherever else that student may be, looking at the next level.
Yeah. We, at the high school, we still have to have a GPA and transcripts. And so I think, Pete, you're gonna discuss this one, the conversion to the traditional GPA scale and how it affects the transcripts at the high school.
So I don't have the guts that Sarah wishes I had, because Sarah would just as soon I say, you know what, I don't care what colleges want. Let's just go with our 4-3-2-1 and let them figure it out. And I just don't have the guts to do it yet. I wish I did. That's the main reason why we do the percentage. It absolutely is. We do this funky conversion to satisfy college's requirements to have a GPA. And for that, I mean, we do it because it does equate to scholarship dollars for kids. The Hathaway requires a GPA, and so we do a funky conversion. And our conversion chart, so everything we do is all about the outcome assessment and the standards referenced grade. It's going to be a 1, 2, 3, or 4, and we have 0.5s in between there as well. And then when it's all said and done, we do something that I hate to say out loud, and I know this is recorded, but we then average the outcome assessment. So we take the 4, the 3.5, the 3, the 4, and we do average. And then from that average, we have a conversion chart. And a 3.2 to a 4 is an A, a 2.7 to a 3.1 is a B, etc. Again, solely for the purpose of generating a GPA, because right now colleges have not embraced this idea of standards reference grading. I know that question was asked earlier. I do believe this is the future of grading for the next foreseeable future. I took a class last semester and I did a little research project on traditional grades. And it's amazing when you look at the history of grades and how arbitrary it really was to assign grades. This has something behind it. As Lee said, her daughter knows exactly what she can and can't do based on the score she has, because right next to it says, is able to do all of this. So it's very, very, it tells a better story. That's what my hope for our grade book is. And we're not perfect, but we keep refining it and trying to get better, but it tells a better story. But you can find conversion charts. We used Robert Marzano's work on assessments and kind of created our scale based on the work that he had done, and it works. It doesn't have as much meaning as the individual outcome assessments, and the kids know that. So the only time it really comes into play is at the very end of the year. And it is a bit of a struggle for our high school kids, because they do typically live in two worlds now, because we do a lot of concurrent enrollment classes through Sheridan College, and those are graded on a traditional type scale. And so our teachers kind of live in both worlds too, which is unfortunate, but I'm going to press for the colleges to change over to our system rather than us giving up and acquiescing and going backwards. I think it would be a step backwards to do that. And we'd be happy to send out that conversion chart that we use as well to anybody looking to do this.
We, at the K-8 level, we do not convert scores. So, for every subject area, if they have like 5 outcomes or 7 outcomes, then we have 7 outcome scores that are reported separately. But the conversion that Pete was telling you about is only at the high school.
Thank you. We'll just take a little pause and see if anybody has any questions about anything that we've talked about, or anything else that you might be thinking about that you want to ask. And I'm fine, you can unmute and ask, or drop them in the chat.
This is Tracy Schneider from Laramie 2, and we're struggling with moving to the standards-based grading at our secondary level, primarily because we have resistance around the idea of eligibility. Can you talk about how you overcame that at your secondary schools?
Yeah, Tracy, I'll jump in on this a little bit. That is a big thing at our secondary level with eligibility. And so it really, again, takes a shift in how you think, a paradigm shift in terms of assessment, to say, if a kid is working towards becoming proficient. So we still have a weekly eligibility, and it's based on their proficiency on that outcome assessment. The reality is you may only do an outcome assessment once every 4 weeks. So it's a long time to go. We're not going to let a kid be ineligible though for 4 weeks until, they take the next outcome assessment. Well, our philosophy is, here's the grade you have. It falls below the level. Here are the things that kick in. You're going to come in and you're going to work with Mrs. Zimmer for the next 2 flex times, and you're going to do some reteaching, relearning. She's going to remediate the things that you're missing. And what's great is Lee knows exactly what it is that student doesn't know. It's not arbitrary. It's not a 60% of something and she has to hunt it down. Lee knows exactly what that kid cannot do. So she targets the intervention, and they have 1 week to bring that grade up, and they can do a reassessment. But let's say Lee says, you know what, Pete's come in 3 times and we've worked on it. He's still not quite ready to take that assessment. That child of God is not going to be ineligible that weekend, because it's not about punishing the kid because they learn slower than someone else. We want to make sure that, what we're doing is reflective of our practice, which is some kids take longer to learn it. So we don't ever see eligibility as a punishment, and we never want to use it that way. What this also does is it separates your can'ts and your won'ts. We do have kids that are sometimes on the ineligible list. They typically are a won't. A can't doesn't understand it and they're working their tail off. They need to play. A won't says, I'm just not going to come in and do it. Well, now you've made it a little tougher. And now Lee says, I've asked Pete to come in 3 times. He has bailed on me every single time. He has not come in. I don't know where he's at because he hasn't let me work with him. Well, now it's week 2. Now you are ineligible. So we still do it on a weekly basis. But ultimately, when that list comes out, our principals will check with the staff and say, Lee, where's Pete at this week? I know he's on the list for the 2nd week. Is he doing okay? Is he not? And that's how we handle it here. And I, welcome anybody else. Annie really doesn't have to deal with it at the elementary level. Lee, does that sound real similar to how Richard handles it?
That's exactly what we do at the middle school. If they're not proficient on assessments, it's not that they're automatically ineligible. It's about what are they doing to try and get proficient. So are they meeting with the teacher? Are they taking care of opportunities? And if they are, and they're still not proficient, then I get kind of the flexibility to say, you know what, they're working on it. It's okay. You're not ineligible. And kids are really good. They get it. Parents are supportive. Of course they want, the parents want their kids to learn it. But that idea of flexibility of, they're at a 2.5, they're just not quite there. You need another week or whatever it is. And we can mark ineligibility as such. So it's not an automatic punishment of not playing if they're not ineligible or if they're not proficient.
Okay, thank you.
And
This
Tracy,
is Lisa. William, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it would be fine if when I email the recording and the proficiency scale that Sarah's going to get to me, I could share our policy or the policy on eligibility that's in the student handbooks as well. Right, Pete? That's not a problem.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Happy to share it.
Okay, Lisa, sorry, go ahead with your question.
No problem. Thank you very much. How do you guys deal with students on an IEP? And do you try to make sure they meet grade level proficiency standards, or how do you adjust for that?
I can take that question. I work closely with a special ed director, and one of the things that she has told me is that the proficiency scales have been really helpful to her staff, because then they can take a look at those and say, okay, here's what the students need to know and be able to do to be proficient. And then they can modify the curriculum based on, those outcomes, those components within the outcome, or they can provide accommodations for those. We do a lot of co-teaching as well in our districts. So sometimes we have special ed teachers working directly with teachers to make sure that kids are working toward those goals. And in some cases, the curriculum is pretty modified so that they have to have similar goals, but they're just not going to be at that level yet. And we use that word a lot, yet. We just know they'll need more time.
And I can speak to that too, if that's okay, Carol. What I would say is a big part of our process that helps us through all of this is the collaboration. We've got to be a PLC team. We've got to be working together. And a big part of our meetings, if I have a grade level team, we're 2-section, for example, my 5th grade level team, the special education teacher attends those PLC meetings and is a large contributor to those, because we're talking about, here is the SMART goal based on this outcome. How are we going to help these children get there? And we go through and talk about different kids. Okay, they're going to need these accommodations to reach this. Do we feel and agree that those are reasonable based on their IEP? That really helps us. And again, it can still help those students feel that level of success. And it really also helps the teachers break down best ways to teach that and be very clear on what the expectation is of the outcome as well.
Thank you. That is very helpful.
Any other questions?
Hey, Carol, I might share just a minute on personnel. If you're an administrator, I see Shad's on here for sure. And if you're looking to go to this, and others have said it, Sarah said it, you can't do enough PD. And that's probably something that we certainly could have done a better job of. Once we kind of got on board and most of our people were figuring it out, we kind of figure everybody just knows it. And your hiring practice, you got to remember, you're always getting new people. you start to kind of go back into the ways that are comfortable. So, a couple things to keep in mind is make sure you have the right people in the bus that buy into the system. If you haven't done this yet and you're going to, you will have those that are not going to buy in, and that's okay. It may be one of those where, and we had some in this district that they just chose to leave. They had rule of 85, they were ready to retire, didn't want to learn something new. And they just, because for 35 years, they've done it this way, 90, 80, 70, 60, close my door and teach, leave me alone. And then they made a good choice for themselves. But I think we have to remember that we have to continually go back, and it's okay to not be 100% on board at the beginning. But you have to be willing to move there. And if you're not, then it's probably not a good fit. You're not going to be able to see this probably, but I think of something like this. I wasn't the superintendent at the time, but if you imagine that black dot in the middle as being standards reference grading, a good exercise would be to have your staff put themselves where they're at in relation to standards reference grading. I dig it. I buy it. Lee Zimmer's going to be right in the middle of that dot. She gets it. She understands it. If you're kind of out here, I'm going to help you get closer to the middle. If you're all the way outside the circle, that's going to be one of those conversations that we're going to have. And this may not be the right place for you. And it's okay to have those conversations. Because if you absolutely can't buy into this, then it's probably not a good fit. I'll share one quick example, and then I'll be quiet. We were interviewing for a position at Tungerville Middle School. Annie was on that interview team with me. Had this gal come in, and obviously standards reference grading is something we believe in wholeheartedly. It's a non-negotiable. There's a lot of things we can negotiate about. Jeans on Thursday, is that okay? Not okay. But standards reference grading is not something that we're going to negotiate. This gal was super. She would be a good fit. Her personality was great. It was going to be, it would definitely be a good fit for our school. We asked about standards reference grading, and we talked about assessments. How are you on retakes? Well, I think they shouldn't get retakes. Well, we're a district that requires retakes because it's about the kids knowing what they can do. So that's what you would do here. Well, okay, I could see that. And so we asked, what grade would you give them? Well, I think it'd only be fair if we average their first assessment with their second assessment, because it wouldn't be fair to give them the grade on the second one, because the kids that did it the first time and got it right, it wouldn't be fair for this other kid to have had a second chance and get the full grade. So I said, okay, so you would take a 60% the first time and an 80% the second, and you'd give them a 70% for their overall grade? She said, yes. And Annie and I were both like, boy, we're trying to get her on board here. She couldn't come around to it, and we couldn't hire her, because it's that important that you get the right people that buy into that philosophy.
Okay. Any other questions?
So this is Lisa again. I emailed Sarah, but I would love to know what you guys do for PD so that I can implement this. I'm kind of taking the trip backwards because we've implemented standards-based grading this whole year, and we're doing some shifting, and we need some more information on top of a mass surge in enrollment. I'm an elementary principal for the Wyoming Virtual Academy. So I am very interested in what you do for PD, and I've done a lot on my own, but I would like to know some more information if you guys could share that somehow. Just email is fine, not here.
And I see Shad's put in there about Marzano consultants. They are good to reach out to as well. They have a lot of great resources. So Shad, that's a good idea. And you can hire Sarah because she's really good at it too. Or any of these, Annie, Lee, I'll put them up. They can go travel.
We'll take our show on the road. This fall, we listened to a webinar series from Tom Schimmer, SCHIMMER, and I will email that out to you, Lisa. But he did a 2 or 3 day, I can't remember, fall was a long time ago. He did a 2-day workshop, and we Pete and I watched it with our 2 high school principals. And he was really, really good. Shared a lot of information, had good handouts that promoted a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting on what we were doing. So he's somebody I would definitely recommend, and he is through Solution Tree.
Any other questions? Okay, how about
I have
final-
one.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, it took me a while to wiggle
That's
my buttons around here. So I am curious, I joined late, so I didn't catch some of it. Maybe you covered this, but so it's one of the things when you brought up PD that we're discovering this year, and we're not to the point of standards-based grading. We're doing Marzano's high reliability schools framework, and we're just trying to get through the second level, which is highly effective teaching this year. Standards reference grading is the third level. And so that's kind of where we're at. But how do you, I mean, Evanston's a little bigger district. We bring on, 15, 20 new teachers a year. How do you keep them? Do you have an induction program or system in place where you get the new folks trained up every year? What's that look like?
We bring our new teachers in for a week before school starts, and we've done a variety of training with them. Sometimes I do it, sometimes we had an instructional coach that would also help with that process as well. But this last year, we actually contracted with Jan Haig. Because of the pandemic, she owed us some hours. And so we actually brought her in, and she did a great job. She was able to custom tailor our professional development to a day with our principals to answer questions at that level. But then also she worked with our new staff for a couple of days, and that was just powerful. So having her come in and give that feedback has been really important. The other thing I would mention really quickly too, Shad, is that Jan offers workshops around the state, and I'm a firm believer, when I send people, I go myself. I know what she's going to say, but number one, I always learn something new. But secondly, a lot of times the new teachers need to understand how you're implementing something. So, if Jan says, for instance, high priority standards, we call it outcomes. So little things like that you can get hung up on. And so you want to be there to just kind of help them through it so that they know, and they know how we're implementing what she's saying.
Yeah, we've had her in about 20 days this year.
Yes.
Like that, and another one. Did you, Sarah, who wrote the standards reference handbook thing for your district? Is that your project or?
Well, I can say that I put it together.
We've been looking at it. That's why I asked. But.
Yes. And if you want the Word document form of it to make it your own, you're welcome to, because I actually got the original from Excelsior Springs, Missouri. Their high school, they're leading school in standards-based grading, and they allowed me to share parts of it. So I just kind of put together lots of the pieces of it, but then ran it through our steering committee, and so had lots of help with that.
Awesome. Well, good work. We're learning lots from it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Grading from the inside out. This is Tom Schwimmer, the one that Sarah mentioned. That's a good start too. I know Tim was talking about secondary level. It's tough. Good book study with your administrators, or for your administrators to take your staff through. There's another one that we did. I'm looking across my room. I can't see it, but there's another really good one, Sarah, that you'd ordered for us a couple years back that really hits on standards reference grading.
The Proficiency Scales one?
That's beneficial. Yeah, it was a different one. We'll find it and I'll send out the list for you.
Okay. Just to kind of finish up, I know Lee put in the chat, don't give up, the journey's worth it, not only for the kids, but professionally. But I just ask our speakers, they're.
Yeah, sorry, School Leader's Guide to Standards-Based Grading. And that's Jan Haig and Phil Warwick.
Perfect. So Pete, while if any just last thoughts from our presenters, Pete, since you're on the screen.
Yeah, you bet. I would just say at some point you just have to jump in with both feet. There's never going to be a perfect time to do it, but you need to do a lot of work ahead of time. do the book studies, do the, get a lot of people. And then once you have that critical mass, then jump in with both feet. You're not going to have everybody on board, and they'll either select to stay with you or they'll look to do something else. And both decisions are okay. But at some point, jump in. And I think you'll be glad that you did.
Can you put the name of that book in the chat that you shared? Thank you. Annie, any last thoughts?
Sure. I think the thing is just communicate. I think that's the biggest thing. You have to communicate with your families. You have to make sure that as a staff, you're on exactly the same page. And we have to communicate with our kids what our expectations are so that they can rise to meet those. And if they don't know, how do they know what their end target is? And so I think communication, organization, and working collaboratively are things that have really made this process worthwhile. But again, like everybody on this panel has said, I would fear the day to have to go back to ABCD. I don't know how to teach in that system anymore, how to work in that system. I really believe that this is the way going forward that's best for children.
Thanks. Lee, anything else?
The only thing I was thinking of was just the PLC training that we've done, with Anthony Muhammad, listening to him speak. It's a lot of just kind of standard reference, but more about, not giving up on kids. And it's about the learning. I think the PLC part of it is that we all work together. And in the beginning, we had some crucial conversations that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, but it makes us better. And I think if we can go through those conversations, we expect kids to do it. We should be able to do it as professionals. It's nothing, personal, but being able to trust each other, that we can work better together than we can individually by going in our own rooms and shutting our doors. So the work is hard, but it's not just you. It's the social studies teacher helping me do math. It's me helping the English teacher do writing. And so we're all working together and sharing that load.
Thank you. Clint, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, as a school board member, I can't say how proud I am of our district and our administrators, our teachers, for implementing this. It's such a wonderful thing. As a school board member, it's a really scary thing to go into. It's big change. Nobody wants that, but it's so worth it. And there's no way, again, that we wouldn't go back to the other way. And I remember you were there when this all started. I wasn't. And it was a hard change, and it was so worth it. And other people looking to do it, get a hold of your school boards and tell them to do it. I mean, it's the way to go.
All right, thank you. So this has been recorded. I will email it out to everyone who was registered for the webinar, and I will send all of our presenters emails with that, and the eligibility policy. And when Sarah sends me some other stuff, I'll send that out as well. And the recording will also be on the WyomingPBS website. And I just want to thank everybody for joining, and especially thank those of you from Sheridan School District number 1 that shared with us today. Great job. So, and anybody can email me at any time as well for more information about other things we do at WyomingPBS, or how to get a hold of anybody or other questions. So thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you.